And it just came up with, there we go. There we go. Right. Now I've got it. Hi, I am Jeana Locke, and this is the Soul Container. Tonight we're going to be talking about taking the right steps at the right time and living in integrity. Are your words and your actions in line with what you believe and what you want and value in your life? So I'm an intuitive coach certified in several areas in Eastern medicine. And then I also have a PhD in applied behavioral studies and education. I combine Western science and Eastern modalities to create this little great vibes transformations concepts that I use. And I use a lot of different Eastern modalities to do it. So what it is that is important about me probably is I've been there, I've been stuck, I've been really stuck, not knowing what to do or how to do it. And I didn't know how to get out of my own way. I found that none of my Western science was doing it. When I started combining and releasing what was stuck, I was able to move forward and then use some of the different ways to restructure how I was thinking and how I was acting and behaving to help me move forward. And I felt much better. So that's what we're going to do a little bit about. And the whole purpose of the Soul Container is to hold a sacred space for you so you may release, you can activate, and you can move forward. It's to take that next big leap together. So the session tonight is we're going to release trapped emotions, blocks, imbalances, all aspects which needs to be healed and brought into your awareness that are stopping you from living in integrity in all aspects of your life, and be not using your words and actions to be in that space. Then we're going to activate the environment and your habits to fuel the energy so that you may live in integrity and at your highest alignment. So one of the things about this is, if you know you need this, is do you know what your intentions are? And are you clear? Do you know what they're based on? Can you identify the value of each intention that you got? And are your words and actions in alignment with those intentions? So when you say, this is what I want to do, is that in alignment with what you believe, or is that in alignment with what society's telling you you're supposed to believe? And am I experiencing a breach or an imbalance, an infringement in my moral decision making? And that's a pretty hard one to talk about. It's pretty tough to stop and say, is this the way I want to be? We've had so many topics come up this year from Black Lives Matter. We had the Me Too movement before, and how it is you use your words and your actions to live in integrity with what you truly value. And how do you do this with standing in your power? So we want to be able to help you figure out and understand if you're in integrity and release what's blocking you from being in integrity. The next thing I want to do is that when you do this, we want to be sure you're having the opportunity to give clear messages to the universe about what you truly want, about how you want to feel when it occurs, and the process of which you'd like to see this. Except sometimes the universe is going to open it up bigger. So we're going to try to provide some consistent ways for you to create some effective habits and for you to be able to focus on what you really want. So the first part is on releasing the trapped emotions, and that part we're going to do first. We want to be sure that for everybody in this group, you know that you've already been placed in a sacred container. You have your own spot. You're in the Akashic records. I have my own spot, and each person is separated. That if you are watching the replay or purchasing it later or doing it at any point, it's the same experience. There's a spot for then there's a spot for each person who does it no matter what. So just be aware that this is going to be able to opportunity to let you heal, and you may want to re-listen to it if it's an area that hits hard for you. Please don't use this if you're driving or if your attention is needed for operating equipment of any sort, or if you're caring for someone or something. So if you need to listen to it, feel free to do so. So as we get going, I wanted just to stop very quickly and stop and say, I'd like you to stop and say, I'm going to say something and then ask you to say your name and say it out loud if you can. And if you can't, just say it to yourself. But do I say your name? Am only say your name. And I'm a sovereign part of God. I say your name. Am only, please say your name. And am a sovereign part of God. I say your name. and only say your name. And I am a sovereign part of God, the Creator. So every time you're getting sort of scattered or frenzied or not feeling totally right in the spot, then just stop and do your I am statements. There's a lot of research on I am statements, and I am is bringing you back to center on who you are. All right, so our first emotion tonight that we wanted to be able to release is physical emotional shock. This is from current life. This was from past life. This was from inherited. And there were some things holding it in place that are emotions that are underneath it that are holding this emotional shock, the physical emotional shock in place. And the physical emotional shock is sort of like there's a group of compounded emotions. So it'll be like this one and this one and this one all come together, and they created this big emotion that made its own new emotion, and it's holding this one in place. So the first one was humiliation. So when it's hard to stop and live your values, one of the things that was some kind of a physical emotional shock that is keeping you from living your values, your words and actions living it, that physical emotion shocks were holding that in place is humiliation. And the humiliation had to do with at some point when you did speak your words, you got humiliated or you were treated in a bad way. The next one was resentment. There was either resentment towards you for doing it or you resented others. And this, remember, this is inherited. This is either past lives and it could be current life. So when you think about any of your grandparents, any time that they may have spoken up on behalf of a culture or a group that were being treated badly. So let's say that they were living in Germany and there were a family of Jews that lived next door, and the Nazis decided to gather up all of the Jews and take them away on trains. And that family that lived next door that really valued this Jewish family that lived there didn't stop anybody or do anything. The guards that came through were able to do it. And not to say they should have, I'm just trying to say that they felt bad later and they had resentfulness about how that group was treated. So this is like, oftentimes this is inherited on this one, is the humiliation, the resentment, and a guilt feeling for what happened to somebody else. So it's a huge combination of it. For me, I literally could feel this come up as a person who's Native American, who may not look it, but I am. And my grandmother, her mother, and my great-great-grandmother came on the Trail of Tears, and my great-grandmother was a baby on the Trail of Tears. And when that occurred, all of the upheaval of losing all of our land and all of our things and all of the components of that family and being upheavaled and all of the stuff that occurred. So the humiliation, the resentfulness and guilt just for being Native American. Just for being Native American, because the U.S. government decided to steal all of the land from that group in Mississippi. And it was a huge issue that came about. That was a huge one as we did it. So I'm going to release this joint compounded emotions that caused some type of a physical emotional shock. And that physical emotional shock is pretty significant, because it was something physical that happened that they saw and experienced, but it created an emotional thing as well. The next one is a sickness memory. And the sickness memory is a memory of an experience where you didn't live your authentic self. You remember it, you weren't there, and you wished you had done it, you wished you had stood up for somebody. There was somebody bullying somebody at school and you wished you had done it, and you have this memory of it. Or you had this experience of having in a work environment, somebody said something or did something and you didn't stand up and stop it. I've seen numerous males who've had this particular one come up around the Me Too movement. They saw other males who were dominating females and they did nothing about it. They didn't stop it. They felt bad. They felt sick to their stomach, but they felt that they couldn't do it, and they felt helpless and hopeless on it. They were fearful of what society would say. They were fearful of what friends would say. They were fearful about anybody else, what they would do. So they kept it inside of them, and it made them physically sick. So they didn't stand up for when they saw injustice occurring. They didn't do that. So they didn't live in integrity for what they said they believed in. And it was a big issue for them. They started having physical illnesses like stomach aches and headaches and body aches and all kinds of issues that came up. You may have seen this, and you may see this in your children, because there's many of them who get bullied online with cyberbullying, and that when they all of a sudden have to go on, if they've seen cyberbullying, they either are feel fearful of going on and doing the online experiences. And there's a whole component around that because the cyberbullying is pretty strong in the schools. I used to teach dual credit, and the students who would talk about the fact getting on to do a class or turning in their paperwork was fine, but they didn't really, a lot of the students didn't want to have accounts in any of these other places because they felt very bullied, and it would end up coming up and being discussed in the classes. And it was super interesting as they did that. But they had the ones who saw it and didn't do anything about it, they felt really bad about it because they believed it was wrong, but they didn't know how to stand up and stop it. So we want to release sickness memory. And I'm doing that sickness memory for inherited as well. Miasms. Miasm is when it's inherited, and it was that same issue when it came up. That was, again, the Nazis coming in. So there is like a whole issue around illnesses that came up from an inherited that came around. This would have anything to do with any kind of enslavement that occurred that is inherited and it's sort of stuck within us. It could have to do with many of the cultures that end up having a tough time in getting transferred from, and I want to say transferred is not the right word, but they get relocated from this spot to another spot to another spot till they can find a country that will take them in and allow them just to be normal people. And to do that, and the prejudice against them because of the color of their skin or the language that they speak, the prejudice that they experience is pretty significant. So the miasms are when those are inherited, and there's quite, every one of us have miasms in some form or fashion, where someone in our families in the past, DNA families, whether mother, father, whichever side, they wished they had not allowed some things to occur that they allowed to occur. So we're clearing miasms. Idea intolerance is the next one. You tried to stand up for something you believed in. You believed in this, you stood up for it, you went ahead and said, and you spoke up. And you got beat up. You either got beat up emotionally or you got beat up physically. You lost your job. You had something occur because you stood up and took your stand on what you believed in was ethical and what was right. And it is one of those things where you had this idea and you believed in it, and all at once. So if you can just picture a time when you can do that, I can picture a time when I stood up heavily for a topic that I believed in. And before I knew it, in that job situation, somebody offered me instead, when I completed my doctorate, the other people that had worked where I had gotten some type of a compensation when they finished their doctorate, because I was over 5 departments, which went over 7 campuses, and I was getting paid less than a campus director was being paid, but I was over more programs, larger programs, and more stuff. And when I finished my doctorate, the whole thing had been, oh, well, whatever. I finished my doctorate and I completed it. And the superintendent of the school, the board, decided they wanted to upgrade my position because it was at a high level at this point. I supervised 50, 60 people, and I had a lot of stuff going, and it was as large as a campus. And I wanted to make the program equivalent to it. And the superintendent was not someone who liked me, and she didn't care for me, and she fought that. So she came in and offered, instead of allowing them to upgrade the position to this director level, and to be able to do that, she came in and said, we're just going to give you a manager 2 position, and made up this new position, but there's no pay increase. So I was very quiet when she spoke, and she did this and said, it's going to be on the board meeting tonight, by the way, and we just want you to be aware of it. And I explained to her that I would not be signing a form that says, oh, now you're a manager 2, you have no pay increase, and now we can add more duties to you. And I said, there's no need to do that. I'm not going to sign the agreement on this form. And she became very angry, screamed at me. A lot of issues happened. And before you knew it, my life became very miserable there because she went after me because I stood up for the fact that I was being treated unethically and without integrity. And as I did that, I learned in my next job to never speak up. You know, don't even bother to speak up. And I became fearful of speaking up. So when we do that, it occurs to us is because we're afraid of what will happen in the repercussions. The repercussions on me became that she doubled my workload. She added so much extra stuff to me. She tried to transfer me from one boss to another boss. She did all kinds of stuff just out of vindictiveness. And as you do that, so my idea and tolerance of getting a pay title advancement was a very negative one, and I would push back against it. So I didn't want to stand up integrity wise and stand up for what there would be. It took me a long time to stop and start standing up for myself again in employment situations. So that could happen. But this happens oftentimes with families, inside families, that you stand up for something and those in the family may not agree. So if you have a family that's super into organized religions and you're into spiritual experiences, but you don't attend church on a regular basis, or you may not attend church at all, and you have nothing against church, but you do not feel that need to contribute financially to that, or you don't feel a need to go to those experiences and do those types of things, then sometimes you get a lot of pushback from the family and have a lot of name calling and a lot of, you know who you are, and a lot of inferences, and a lot of things occur. And when that happens, sometimes they cut you off, spouses change how they treat you, things occur. Whatever that may be, when you stood up and you said authentically, this is who I am, I believe in these concepts, and I believe these are important. I'm not negating the way you do it. I just see it different, and you're negated by the others. That idea concept gets it where you don't want to do it anymore. So we need to release the concept of the idea of standing up will hurt us, that we're going to get injured, we're going to get cut off, we're going to get released. We're going to no longer be able to have, to even speak. We're afraid to speak. Thank you. The next one is no will to, and it's no will to take responsibility for your words and actions. It's no will to commit to standing integrity. You've lost the will to do this. You have been pushed down and shoved down and treated with disrespect and felt like you're valueless. Your efforts are unreceived. All of the types of words I just said or emotions that you experienced that were holding that in place. And that no will to commit and no will to be responsible for your words and actions is because you tried that and you did it. It didn't work. I didn't like it. It may have been in a past life. It may have been in a current life. It could have been in a situation where you may be right now, which each time you speak up, you get pushed right back down. And there are many of us who have had that happen. So when there's that no will to take responsibility for your words or actions, or no will to commit, we just want to release that and allow you to be able to stop and let those words come through in a loving way. So we want to release the no will to be responsible for words and actions, and a no will to commit. And we want to be able to help you understand that you can find ways to speak and to be present and to be able to do that in a very loving way, and finding the integrity of doing it where it's not devaluing the other, and allowing that to occur. Thank you. The next one is a negative broadcast message, which is don't do anything where somebody can criticize me. And this is a whole lot to do with social media right now, on Facebook pages and Instagram and Twitter, any place it can be. Don't do anything where someone could actually come in and criticize me. Don't do anything where they can come after me and they can put me down. I don't want to have to, I am, whether or not I should have to defend myself or choose to have to defend myself, I don't even want them to come after me and to come and do that. And so when that occurs, is don't do anything. A broadcast message inside your head is don't do anything at all, which would allow others to come after me and attack me. So for those people who, and this group, it may not be particular, but if someone's listening and they are a gay or a lesbian, they may not speak up and be open about being gay and lesbian because they don't know what would happen to them if they did that. They don't know how they would be treated if they did that. If someone, I can tell you that I used to wish my name was where it looked like a male's name, because I saw every male in the organization get $10,000 a year more for the same job that I did, and I had more education and more years of experience. And when my students that had names like Samantha would graduate, I'd say, please put Sam on the top of your resume. And then encourage them to do that because of the fact they get more interviews and they get a higher offer when it came time to go do it, because of the prejudice against it. But they didn't want to do anything where others could criticize them. And as females, that happens to us often. We don't want to get criticized, and we don't want to be attacked, and we don't want to be put down. So we need to release that so we can live in integrity, because we have the right to live in integrity, and we have the right to have our actions and our words be in a way that shows what we really value and what we think is important. So we want to release the negative broadcast message. Yes. The next one is we need to release the fear, the fact that we feel vulnerable, and allowing vulnerable to be a strength instead of a weakness, that we feel in a weakened state as vulnerable, versus that understanding that vulnerability gives us a stepping stone to understanding and compassion that others may not have. And so instead of seeing vulnerability as a strength, we see it as a weakness. So we want to release the weakness part of vulnerability. We want to release that component, that we are less than, that we are not enough, that we can't do as much, and that others have the right to step on us or do anything. And as we go into that, we do want to activate that whole component of vulnerability, and being in that we want to be able to show compassion for all different perspectives and values that people may have. We may not have to agree with them, but we can at least show the compassion that they may not agree with us. The next one is a big reason on why we don't actually stand up for our values is we feel violated. We've been attacked. We've been attacked financially. We have been attacked verbally. We have been attacked physically. There is a whole violation component of that. I don't feel that I'm violated, and there's no way that I can stand up for what I believe in, because I will get violated even more. Many females feel this way, and they feel like if they stand up, like if they stood up and said, in my values, I believe that all people are created equal, and that there is not prejudice based upon gender. And yet, as a female, you got paid less than someone else if you spoke up, or if someone touched you inappropriately at work and you spoke up, that you would actually be violated in some way and you would get in trouble. The concept of that is that has been so true in the past. And as we come further into it, and the more that we do not allow those violations of the past to hold us back there in the past, and we release that stuckness. So if we can release the violations and stop and look at them as strengths, that we understand what truly needs to be done, and we understand what's really important, and that we understand that we have the power to become part of the solution, because that violation helped us understand what it's like when you get to put in that place of fear and the scarcity of what they're going to do when they threaten you. So there's a whole lot with that. So we want to release violated and say that if that has occurred with any of us, that we're going to use that as our strength instead. We're going to use that to build upon who we are and to take it as part of our standing. And if we put it on our soapbox when we get up, just say, I don't allow this anymore to occur, and to speak up for ourselves, to say it's okay to ask for a pay raise. It's okay that we've been in an epidemic, but these companies that are asking to hire right now, if they all of a sudden decide they want to lower the pay, but they're making more profit, you can stop and look at that and go, that is they're violating me. And to be able to stop and say, it's okay to speak up and say, I believe this is worth more money, and to ask for that. You can make decisions based upon what comes back, but you definitely should feel the comfort and the strength to know that that was a violation of who you were. And they did that because they thought they would get away with it. So that's why it's very hard to stand up. Standing up in your career is one of the hardest places for women to do. It's very tough to stand in your strengths and stand in who you are and know this is what it is, because we have been pushed down for so long. And standing up to say equal pay is right, equal treatment is right. It is very fair to say that the concept of how the process goes, I'm ready for applications to completely change. I feel violated every time it says on an application, and I should tell you, I don't change my name. When I married, I did not change my name because I refused to write on there formerly known as, because they never know a male has divorced or not divorced. But they know if a female is, if she changed her name and then she changed it back when they say formerly known as. The question, if they need to be able to check to see if that's you, who you are, they've asked for your identification numbers, they've asked for gender, they've asked for your high school graduation dates, they've asked for so many ways to be prejudiced against you, and that's just one more that they do to a female. And it's sort of like, if my social security card is in this name, then I have no reason on earth for you to have to stop and ask me what a former name was, because that card is enough to get me hired. But they do it and they get away with it, and people choose to fill it out. And it's the reason I don't change my name ever. And it was very interesting when I've gone through those experiences. So violated is released. Physical trauma is a vibrational frequency. It's stuck during an intense trauma that's usually shocking or stressful, and it's injury. And it's probably inherited on all of us. Not everybody had it. Over 3/4 of the group has had it, but it was something that happened in the past. And it was probably due to someone speaking up against injustice against race, someone speaking up against the race or color or gender, and they got physically injured for it. That could have been in their homes by people that they knew. That could have been, so for in some countries, women who are not allowed to drive and women who are not allowed to show parts of their faces or their skin. And those are different physical traumas where it is one of the situations that those kind of traumas are existing today. They happen often. There are people who are physically injured for their gender preferences and who they are. So the physical traumas are pretty extreme, but there's lots from the past. And a lot of them have to do with color and with race. I think that a lot of those came when people and our inherited emotions are people who really did try to stand up for what was right. And that standing up for what was right could have been about animals. It could have been about the ocean. It could have been about children and slavery. It could have been about physical abuse in someone else. It could have been about so many topics for so long that physical trauma is that people were physically harmed when they didn't do what society thought was the normal and stay within those boundaries. The next one is probably the strongest for this group, and it's afraid to be visible for what they believe. Often, the largest number of people coming to work with me are referrals. And sometimes you can say, I'd let, and you can give bonuses for referrals or whatever. But it's interesting to me is that some people will say, I actually don't know anybody else who's into woo, or I don't know anybody else who I'd want to tell, but they have lots of friends. That's because we are afraid, we as a group, all of us, are afraid of being visible for what we believe. Because we believe in a higher being. We believe there's a higher source, a higher God. We may not call it the same exact thing as what they do in the book called the Bible, or the different spiritual books that are out there that have definitions to them. And yet it's hard for us to stand up and say, this is who I am. I'm a spiritual person. And I believe in energy work, because so many people do not. And they will stop and look at you from a different angle. And there's a huge fear of being visible. It's okay to do it as long as nobody knows. Or you may have a spouse that is like, so what do we tell people you do now? Now, what am I going to tell people? Not necessarily does it work or does it not work, or how do you feel about it, but what are you going to tell people? Or what is it going to be? And how do you describe it in a way that helps them be able to do that? So that being afraid to be visible is releasing that. It's a big topic for all of us because it's hard to stand up and become visible. And sometimes we feel like we have to leave behind a part of us when we do that. So anyone who has some type of a degree in some type of a health profession in the United States that is in a health profession such as LPC or psychologist or psychometrist or any of those arenas of that nature, and they speak up and say, I'm certified in energy healing in any sort, whether, no matter what it may be, and they speak up, they will lose their license. They will lose their licensed professional counselor. So that being visible and actually using energy work and Western together is huge. When I got ready to start doing energy work, I had my PhD, and my hole went behind my macular eye. And one of the biggest things that came out within the last 6 months for me has been that I thought I had to give up the PhD. And while I didn't necessarily give it up and say, oh, I don't have a PhD anymore, I had to not talk about having a PhD because of the fear of the FCC coming after me because I have a PhD. And it's in a field that is where all of the people who have that particular degree, applied behavioral studies and education, that's where all the psychologists and psychometrists and LPCs are. And I have all the courses for psychometrists and for LPC. And that it was all sitting there. And that if they would come after me to start saying, oh, you're trying to do this, and here it coming after it. I had the most difficult time to become visible, to be me as Dr. Locke and as an energy healer. And that I'm both. And I combine the best of both. And being able to embrace that and live it has been my biggest thing. And I can tell you that this energy hits around this time every year. And when this was hitting, the person who worked on my website will tell you, I would not let her put the word PhD and what my education was on my website. I wouldn't even let it be there. I didn't even say that I had it. I was so fearful of being attacked and having those things occur, and I wasn't willing to stand up for what I really valued. The next one is being submissive. It's easier just to like push back and not do it. Now, I totally grasp that every value we have, we can't stand up and fight the values and be the warrior, and we shouldn't. But we do need to know, when do we stop and observe, and when do we stand up and speak? And when do we stand up and speak and say, this is okay? And how do we do that? And as we become more and more into who we are, is it okay to speak up and say, for those families who have been making decisions about whether their children will be schooled with online learning versus in an in-classroom traditional setting, that's been a huge deal. Some people have been like, oh, they see submissive as being in the online learning experience, and some see submissive as being in the traditional experience. It doesn't matter what it is. It's standing up for what you believe is best for your children and best for your family. It's standing up and saying, this is what I best, and I'm comfortable with it. That's what I believe, and it's what I value. But so many people have become very submissive and asking others, what do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? Do you think I should do this? Do you think I should do that? How do you think I should do that? And when that's asked constantly and consistently over time, that's being submissive, versus stopping and saying, could you help me identify what I need to do to move forward? That you're getting the same question. So you're stuck. You've got this job offer that's come up, and it's a crappy job offer, and you really want to know whether or not you ought to be looking at doing it. You can always consider, could somebody help me look at this to see how I should approach it? Now, that's a great thing to do. But just to go back in and say, oh, I think I probably do. What would you do? What would you do? What would you do? And what would you do? That's submissiveness. Instead of asking, how do I use this to move forward? And what is the next best step for me? So we want to release submissiveness. The next one's unsafe. And unsafe is huge. We feel unsafe to speak who we are. We feel unsafe to say it. We feel unsafe as wives based upon our husbands. Gosh, my throat is about to choke up. Can you tell I have a husband that I may need to do this with? You feel unsafe to say, this is who I am. This is who I am. So we want to release unsafe. I want to talk about in a moment for a person I know that I dearly care about. And her daughter, who used to be her son, came to her 2 years ago and said, I want to become, I'm just going to use a name, Allison, instead of whatever the name was before. I don't even know the new name. I know it. I'm not going to say it. And I want to be Allison. I'm going to be Allison, and I'm going to do this. He felt, this young man felt very unsafe to become who he was. His mother felt very unsafe about telling her friends that she now has a daughter. And how does she share that with the world? And what does she do? It was the most interesting experience. A year ago, we attended a function. Of course, we were allowed to attend functions then, and there were 300 or 400 people there. And as we sat at the table with this couple that I dearly adore and value in my life, and she's talking about this and the dilemmas within her, it was really interesting to watch the fears come up in her eye of what will people say. And when she wanted to talk with me about it, because she went, I'm like, oh, it'll be wonderful to have a daughter. And what are the opportunities that you have coming now that you wouldn't have been able to have done? And I said, you always said you wanted a daughter. And she looked at me in the quietest way, and she said very quietly to me, she said, I need to say it that way. I'm excited about having a daughter. I'm excited I get to go clothes shopping with someone. I'm excited that somebody's going to go get their pedicure or whatever, or manicure with me. And she looked at it totally differently. When this young man was ready to make his announcement publicly, his mom made it the same day and said, I would like to share the greatest picture of my daughter, and named her name. And she says, some of you may remember her as, and she said his name. And she says, please respect her and call her this name from this point forward. She didn't get any negatives on her page, on her Facebook post or her Instagram. And I think it was the way she handled it from such a positive way, but she felt unsafe until she approached it from a new way. So finding the way to approach it is what we want to help activate tonight. The next one is terror and being threatened for standing up. So we feel terror when we are ready to speak up authentically. So we speak up for the elderly, or we speak up for someone of a different race, or someone with disabilities, or we speak up for someone who doesn't have food, or we speak up for children who we feel are not getting what they need in their homes, or we speak up for whatever that may be. There's a terror in us, is that could become me sometimes. It's like, I'm speaking up for this group that has a great need, but there's a fear in us that could be us. And so the terror part of it was being threatened for standing up, and the terror of just knowing, having a feeling of that could be us. So we want to release any terror or threatening feelings and just release them. Being able to speak authentically. I have another thing. Is it an emotion code? No, it's in body code. Just a second. Right, left. Systems. Right, left. Disconnection. Right. Spirit, physical disconnection. It's a spirit physical disconnection. And it is, let's see if that tells us what they need us to know here. It's a disconnection between the spirit and the body. And that means that there's probably one of these emotions that we've worked on that has made it the terror, more than likely, and the being threatened, is that there is a physical disconnection from the spirit for when we do speak. So the spirit physical disconnection, is that about the fear of physical harm if we speak up? Yes. Is that the fear of physical harm for those who stop and say, this is not right? Yes. Okay. Do we need any more information? No. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. That is all they're going to release on that tonight. I think if you can thought of those, you've thought about any time that you've been fearful to live your values. It's why have you been afraid? What has caused it? And what has been the base behind that? Whether it was a fear of losing finances, or fear of losing face, a fear of losing friends, a fear of losing family. There's just fears, and all these different words they use are all about the fears of losing something that we thought we might have. For some people, it is a fear of never being able to get it. And there's a whole different way of looking at that. So it may have been hard to speak up in the past. And it may have been very difficult decades ago. I can tell you, I know for me, having many more decades than any of you, that there are big differences now in what's safe to speak up and where it's not safe to speak up. If you had spoken up about sexual harassment in the workplace 25 years ago, you would have been fired somewhere. They would have found a way to release you and let you go, and you wouldn't have had a job, and you wouldn't have gotten another job. You would have been blackballed in your industry at every place. So if you were in education, every educational institution would have heard this person filed a sexual harassment suit. Don't hire them, and you would have never gotten hired again. It might have been illegal, but it would have happened. And now these things are taken seriously. So people are able to speak up more. So when someone says to you, are you sure you want to do it? You really want to look at the circumstances of where they come from. If there's someone who has had something come up, and if they're giving you advice based upon or words to share that give you some perspective that you need, or if they're doing it to keep you from doing this, to standing up and having that occur. So the other part of that is that finding your words and your actions to live authentically is when you don't do it, you start having a lot of sickness and a lot of illness. You feel bad inside. Your body's going to start showing it up. It may come in as shoulder pain or neck pain. It may come in as headaches. It may come in as cramps. It may come in as colds, or it may, every time you get ready to go do something huge, you'll have something physical happen that will not occur. It'll start showing up physically often when these fears are not, when you're not able to live your values authentically. You will see that. You've seen that in many people. They have not been able to do it. So it's a great time this week to stop and look at, who am I? What do I really value? What do I value? What do I value? Me, just me. What do I value? What do I think is important? It doesn't have to match what each of you think is important. It may match in some ways, but it has to match what I think is important and what's within my soul's wisdom of what I value as a soul. And then the deal is that this is the last part of December. We're coming up on the new moon, and we're going to be writing our stories about what we want our world, what our world will be. And this is our greatest time to set our intentions. But to set those intentions, we truly want to stop and go, what do I value? Do I know what I value? Identify that and look at it, and then write that story as though it's happened. So to help you do that, for all of you who are in this group, on probably Sunday afternoon, Amy Isman and I will be hosting a Write Your December New Moon Intentions. It'll be an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we'll be on there to help you work on that. We'll provide that as a link to come out. We'll send out some prompts to go with it. You can write some stuff up. Amy is a book writer. She writes books. She's an author. She teaches writing. She does a lot. You've got an opportunity to have someone actually stop and help you not throw it together, but put something together that you may be able to look at for a very long time You'll have an opportunity to help her give you words in a new way. My words will be boring, but hers will be great. The prompts we can provide will give you different ways to write this new story, because you're going to write the story of your life. You don't have to attend. You don't have to not attend, and you don't have to join the group. But there will be a time provided as a safe container to ask questions and ask for guidance and to get clarity so that you're able to do that. It's just going to be a writing time that'll be provided for you in a safe container. And more than likely Sunday afternoon sometime towards the evening hours when we get ready to do that. So what we're going to do is want you to be able to write in your present tense. So if you can get your values clarified and looked at them, then that'll be very helpful. For those of you who do not know your values, and if you are a monthly member, feel free to join and upgrade to a yearly member, and it will be a great opportunity. Or you can purchase the values class. The values class has 6 different games in it on ways to identify what your true values are. So that'll be coming out this next week. It'll start, the games will show up. You'll be able to do them at home on your own and play those games and do them. You'll be able to stop and look at them and say, what do I really value? And if that particular game doesn't get it for you, you can go to a different one. There's different ones to do it with. There's card games. There are games that help you write it out. There's games that help you circle things and draw things. There's different ways to look at what you truly value and help you identify that within yourself. And then to be able to say, how do I live that? What words and actions live that in my life? And then we'll create the next part of that course, we're going to create a jar that's going to actually help you be able to look at it and identify just what your life looks like and how these values fit together, and to help keep those values as a priority in your life. And when someone comes up and wants you to do, let's say money is a value, and someone comes up and wants you to do something that is not quite within, you can say, how does that fit within my value system? And then you can determine whether or not it does. So if it were socialization for your family unit, to be able to go do something, and that was a big part of your values, that your family should have this time to have these family vacations and family experiences, and that's part of what that would be, then that would be a great way to stop and say that could be a priority. But when it is something that is not providing that, then you would be able to stop and say, that's not in my values box here, or my values jar. I can't see it. That's not part of my personal development. This may be someone wanting you to donate money or to spend money or to give them money, or it might help you. So you stop and look at what it is on your personal professional development versus how that is impacting your family. And we're going to stop and look at those things to help you identify, what do I really value? And then we're going to write and put together on the third part of this. And each week there will be, the lessons will come out, and then there will be 2 calls that you'll have an opportunity to have live time with me to help identify and clarify. So you'll get 6 question and answer times, and you'll have 3 lessons that come in along with these as well that come up with the opportunity for all of that. So you have all of the one-on-one basically in those calls that you'll need. The last one is going to be, how do you write this clearly to show the universe, this is how I feel. I want to feel, this is what I feel when I have financial freedom. Financial freedom feels like this to me. And to help you write that out so that the universe can give it to you instead of it getting mixed messages. So we are going to be able to do that. Those will start coming out next week. Feel free to upgrade or send me a question if you have anything about it. If you need any writing prompts, ask me about that. We're going to have that workshop on there. So we're going to activate now, because if you don't know your values, this activation may be something you may want to come back to, or I may want to take it and cut it out of this one, and to be able to help you activate what you value so you can live authentically in your life. So we're going to rejuvenate our records. We're going to clean out all of the old stuff we just released. We're going to optimize them and recalibrate your records to activate that you value, that you are a precious soul and you are worthy of what you believe is valuable, being valuable, that you should not negate it. It is valuable and it is worthy. It doesn't have to agree with your spouse. It doesn't have to agree with me. It doesn't have to agree with everyone in the group, but it is worthy because you are a special, wonderful soul. And if that's what you value, that's what you value. We're going to activate that you trust in the divine support, that the Creator is there to help you do the right thing at the right time. Because we don't have to speak up every single time something happens. But there are times when we do need to speak up. There are times when we do need to say, here's what it is. We can't fight every battle. And therefore, knowing which battles to actually stand up for is helpful. And that trusting in divine support to know when to do that. Then we want to trust. The next one is to activate divine support to nurture yourself so that you can give more. What do I do to give myself, help nurture me and take care of me? What self-care do I need to do so that I'm able to actually stand up and do this? Is it doing something like, okay, this is this values class. I need to actually know what they are, and let your spouse play that game with you, and let your children play that game with you. And let that stop and look at me, not that game, but all of the games, and stop and say, do I have a way of knowing that I know how to take care of myself so I can stand up? Because sometimes we get so worn out and so exhausted and so tired, taking care of everybody else and what they value, that our values just go down the drain. And I have been number one on that in years past. And then I made sure everybody else's needs were met. And when it came time to meeting my values, they very seldom got met. So nurture yourself to be able to do it. We want to activate that. We want to activate setting effective boundaries. Because if you don't set effective boundaries, people are going to run all over you. And so there's going to be a time and a place. And how do you resolve and figure out what that time and place would be? We're going to activate taking the right action within your integrity. So sometimes that means that you can stand there, and while you're and I've been known to say often in the last few years, my silence does not mean agreement. And that's it. My silence does not mean agreement. I have no reason to argue with them. I have no reason to try to convince them to do it differently, but my silence does not mean agreement. And I have used that on so many Facebook pages that I have stated, my silence does not mean agreement. And if someone wants to argue back with me, that's fine. But don't assume because I didn't speak that I agree with you. And finding the right action within your integrity, sometimes that's all I can do. And sometimes I speak up and say, this is something of whatever it may be. It depends upon what the issue may be. I'm just trying to get you to stop and look at the fact that you have to say, what's the right thing at the right time for you and within your boundary system. Activate self-worth that I can automatically and authentically be me in my own integrity. So that's finding the self-worth of who you are. That's saying, I know who I am, and I am okay with who I am. I know who I am, and I'm okay with it. Any of you who has not asked me for a cross of consciousness, your cross of incarnation chart, you should send me your chart, or send me what your cross of incarnation is, and let me send you a copy of what your purpose is. You will find that self-worth is so helpful in that. You will find more self-worth out of your purpose of your human design. And it's in the cross of incarnation. So we're going to activate self-worth that I can automatically be me in my own integrity. We're going to activate you feel vital. You feel vital. You feel respected. You feel valued as a soul and as a physical being. You feel vital to all of the parts of this earth. We're going to activate you feel powerful in situations that are in alignment with your values, with your intentions, and with your integrity. So once you set your values and you know them, and then you look at your integrity, how do I set my intentions that I want to have from these values? And how do I live that within this integrity? How do my words and actions live that on a daily basis? Do I live it? Do I say I want financial sustainability and that I should save this much money per month? And then I go and spend this much per day on something that and it's taking me out of my financial deal. So I want to save 10% more, 10% money. And all of a sudden I say, if I take my lunch and I bring my coffee from home, I can save $10 a day. And when we were working outside our homes, we would save $10 a day. And we did that for 20 days a month. That's $200 that we could save. But if our integrity says, I can't save that much money because we don't want to choose to make that choice, it may not be within your integrity or your value system to give up those two things. But in my world, that would be my first two things I would give up. I'd bring coffee from home and I would bring my lunch, and I would be able to live within that value system. That doesn't mean you have to, but what if I said I wanted to live in integrity and save this much a month? How am I going to do that? Where is it that I'm going to find those places? And where is it when it's an optional item versus a non-optional item? So being able to stop and say, feeling powerful in situations that are in alignment with my value, my intentions, and my integrity is standing up for what you said you believed in doing and feeling good about it and feeling proud, giving yourself, maybe you get a star, maybe you get those little stars and put on your calendar and put a star on it that says, I saved my money today that I said I'd save. Maybe you have to find a way to do that. Now we're going to activate that I take care of my needs physically so I can show up authentically. If we are not physically being taken care of, we're not going to be emotionally ready, we're not going to be spiritually ready, and we're not going to be physically ready. So we've got to take care of ourselves physically. That means what we eat. That means what we consume in any form or fashion, whether it is drinks, or food, or media. It means what we live, our environment, and the toxicity in our environment. So as you do that, I take care of my needs physically. We want to activate that. Thank you. Now we want to activate courage and fearlessness. Courage and fearlessness. That's hard to activate. It's like stopping and saying, but we want you to stop and recognize that we're asking God to activate courage, activate fearlessness, activate faith that you have, that the Creator's right there with you to help you do this, that you can show up authentically and you can demonstrate your value to this world. Courage and fearlessness. And they want to activate that it's okay to be vulnerable and to show that vulnerability in a courageous and fearful way. Because when we show our vulnerabilities, we're showing the world there's someone else out there who needed the confidence that you gave them by showing that there was a vulnerability to this. You provided that by opening a door to them. So you gave that, you showed your vulnerability, and all of a sudden they have courage, they have confidence, and they feel empowered to speak because that's how they felt, that vulnerability. I didn't have that one on, I better put it on. There are no others that we need to activate. This is a really interesting one to come back to. I'm probably going to put on one that I'll send out to everybody that may break this down a little bit more as we go, because we may need to actually clear on how to figure out what we value, because we may have blocks up there saying, I'm afraid to figure out what I value because I'm afraid of what I might find. It's sort of like being afraid to be visible to the world, because what if the world sees me for who I am and what will happen to me? The same thing on what I value. What if the world sees I really value this? What if I start standing up and becoming what I value and doing that? What could happen to me? So it looks like I will probably put that out a little, probably in the next week or two. It'll just be sent to you. It'll be a Zoom. If any of you actually want to be on live with it, just send me a message and I'll work out the time with you guys individually. But otherwise, I'll just do it remotely and put that out. All right. So that's all we have for tonight. So this was on getting really clear with your words and actions so that you can live a life authentically and feel good about what you do, what you say, and how you represent yourself and what you show to this world. That's living in integrity and being who we are. Sounds a lot easier than it is, and it's one of the hardest things that we can do. Each of the weeks has led up to being able to find our words and say them effectively. So I thank you for joining me tonight. I thank you for allowing me to go through that experience of having to stop and become visible, to allow me to step into my power and to actually stop and look at what I value and where that may be. And sometimes it's like I would be one of those people that would be hiding behind the invisibility part. I would be the person, did I actually set up good boundaries? Did I actually establish a way of speaking up in an appropriate way? Oftentimes I went dead silent instead of speaking up at all. So showing that up, and I thank you to this group for allowing me and showing me the way to be able to do that with you. And the more I do it with you as a group, then I'm able to do this with the larger group and the rest with the rest of the world. And each of you can also show up as light workers to the world and become a greater light for all of those that are around you. Because when you show up and say, this is okay, there's a lot of people out there waiting for somebody to give them permission to say it's okay. And that's maybe what this was all about. So thank you. And if you have any questions, we'll take those after we do this part.